Well, everyone, and welcome to Growth Stage by FastSpring, where we discuss how digital product companies grow revenue, build meaningful products, and increase the value of their businesses. I'm your host, David Vogelpol. I support the digital product community through my role at FastSpring, and I love to bring the best of the community to you here on Growth Stage. In today's episode, I'm super excited. What we're going to be talking about is what it takes to build an enduring business. We're going to do that through the lens of celebrating 20 years of FastSpring, the company that puts on Growth Stage. And joining us for that conversation to celebrate FastSpring and talk about building an enduring business, I'd like to welcome first FastSpring's original CEO and one of the original co-founders, Mr. Dan Engel. Dan, welcome to Growth Stage.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited we made it to such a successful 20-year journey.
Can't imagine what it must be like to look back on your legacy and have this be something so enduring, be part of that. And I know you've done a lot since then, and I'm kind of curious to learn a little bit more about that here in a bit. Also joining us for this conversation to kind of take a look at the past and where we are now, I'd like to welcome FastSpring's current CEO, Mr. David Nachman. David, welcome.
Great. Well, thank you, David. I'm also super excited to be here. And I definitely owe some gratitude to Dan. I wouldn't be in my role today if it weren't for what he did 20 years ago today.
Now, it's so interesting to think about those long-term effects our short-term decisions sometimes have. And so we're going to try to peel back as much as we can here on this episode to give folks a view into what it takes to build an enduring business, what mistakes to avoid along the way, and how to build a business that stands the test of time. So we'll kick it off. David Nachman, I'd like to start with you. For those, maybe this is their first time seeing the Grow Stage podcast or they're not familiar with FastSpring, could you explain what FastSpring is and what you do here?
Yeah, absolutely. What we do is pretty straightforward. We are an end-to-end e-commerce platform for companies that sell digital goods on a global basis. So it's often software companies, it may be gaming companies, maybe other forms of digital goods, but the commonality for everybody that's selling on our platform is they're trying to reach a global audience, which isn't really an easy thing to do in commerce and payments. There's a tremendous amount of complexity there. And they're all selling digital goods. So that's what we do. I am the CEO of the company. I joined the company about 6 years ago, just over about a month ago from 6 years ago.
Oh, wow. Congratulations on the 6-year mark there. A little over 25% of FastSpring's history, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And then Dan, tell us about your connection to FastSpring and what you're doing now.
Well, let's see. It was 2005 that I met our co-founder, Jason Foodman. And I had an idea for something we wanted to do having to do with upselling into shopping carts. And Jason said, well, that is a really good idea, but we're not going to be able to do it unless we own the shopping cart. And I said, well, what if we create our own shopping cart? And Jason said, well, it just so happens I'm working with a guy on that concept to compete with Digital River, which was the 800-pound gorilla at the time that had come out in 1994. It went public, became worth $1 billion. And so we decided that we would build that e-commerce infrastructure and shopping cart capability. We never ended up doing my idea having to do with upsells, but obviously the foundational part that we needed is what became the business over time.
And this is you, right? Is this from around the time of the founding? These are the original founders, correct?
Yeah, that could be. I'd have to see exactly what year that was, but that's Jason's all the way to the right-hand side on the other opposite end of me, and then Ken and Ryan. And what's interesting is I only knew Jason, but then he knew Ken, and Ken knew Ryan. So through the, I don't know, transitive property or whatever it is, we all kind of knew each other. And that's how we started working together. And we were all in 4 different states from one another. And we did it despite not being in the same place. And we actually went for about 4 years, I believe, without ever even seeing each other. Everything was just email and ICQ, which is chat. And it maybe every 6 months would be a phone call. But, some of the guys weren't, the type of people that were dying to get on the phone or meet in person. They didn't have the same personality as maybe Jason and I did, as kind of the more salesy front of the business.
Was that the balance between you four, where you and Jason were more on the business side and the other two, Ken, and what's the other person's name?
Ken and Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan. And
Yeah,
they were more
totally.
technically focused?
Yeah, Ryan just was an awesome coder who's probably the best guy on the planet to build what we were building. I mean, that's what Ken said at the time, because he had built a company called Reg Now, sold it to Digital River. By the way, all three of the other guys built and sold companies like FastSpring to Digital River. So we knew this space really well, and they knew it even better than I did. But yeah, Jason and I were on the business side, and Ken is amazing dealing with people through email, but he won't pick up the phone. But we had phenomenal customer service that he led. And Ryan just wanted to code and wanted to own it himself. He didn't want other coders. He didn't want to spend time managing other coders. He just wanted to build his dream again, the next generation of what he had built before, using Java technology and doing things in a way that would be much more beneficial over the long term over the existing solutions like Digital River, which became kind of the technology dinosaur that was inflexible. So we wanted to build that next generation system.
It sounds like there was a lot of synergy there between you four and a good balance. And it seems like you and Jason were able to kind of team up, I guess, on the business side, and then Ken and Ryan on the technical and customer success side. It's also interesting to hear about your virtual posture as co-founders back in that day and using ICQ in thriving in that kind of environment. Of course, way pre-pandemic. This was 2005 when the company was founded. And then to hear about how much Digital River played a role in your company and your lives back then, and to think of FastSpring's enduring nature, even going beyond, Digital River offering in existence, I guess, recently kind of winding down there.
Mhm.
Um, and to think about how that's an interesting representation of FastSpring's enduring nature. But maybe that's one of the ways I might think about an enduring business. I'll start with Nachman on this question. David, um, to you, what does it mean to build an enduring business? What is that? How do you define that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say for a business to be enduring is it's got to be adaptable. Like this business, like just about any business, there's ebbs and flows, and there's times when everything is going great, and there's times when it's a lot more challenging. And, in my experience, like there's a lot of things that need to go into strategy and execution to succeed as an enduring business. But I think the foundation of all of it is the team and the culture. If you look at the businesses that I think have endured over time, it's often the team and the culture that really, really stand out because the challenges are going to change over time. And you need a team that knows how to adapt to that. And if you've got the right team and people are passionate about what they're doing, in my experience, generally they're going to figure it out. Like none of us have a perfect crystal ball. Certainly, I'm sure, Dan, when you started this company 20 years ago, you had no idea what some of the challenges might look like today. But I think you built a great cultural foundation that I think still persists today. I think a lot of the elements of the culture that were there when you started it are still like a real strength for us. So to me, that's kind of the foundation of all of it to build an enduring business.
Yeah, I like that idea of flexibility. What's the saying? Steady seas don't make skilled sailors, and like being able to roll with the punches and adapt and survive and thrive. I could see that being critical to building an enduring business. Dan, what about you? What does it mean to build an enduring business?
Well, it's kind of the same things, because what he's talking about there about adaptability and flexibility, that's exactly what I was saying earlier. We specifically built a system from the ground up that had the adaptability component that was missing from the competition. That's why Digital River doesn't exist anymore. That's why we were able to ultimately leave them some degree in the dust, because they weren't able to change with the times. And we knew, because we all had been customers of Digital River. I mean, everybody was back then. It's a long time ago. And we knew that they couldn't deliver when we needed new functionality and features. They were stuck, right? So that was a really big part of it. But I think culturally, the biggest advantage FastSpring ever had was based on culture and how we treated our people, meaning like the employees, the partners we had. and then how that trickled down to how they treated the customers. And we had a theory, which is not too novel, but isn't practiced as much as it should be, that customers should be treated like gold. And we had happened to be in an industry where the competition felt very much the opposite. A lot of these companies were led by kind of arrogant folks that didn't think too much about the customers. And, you'd write into PayPal, nobody'd ever send you anything back, or Digital River, couldn't get your account manager to respond. So we came up with rules like you're going to hear a response within, I think it was 24 hours, even on weekends, even on holidays, um, guarantees like that. And we absolutely delivered on it. We strive to wow every single customer, both the end user and our merchants, the software companies. And the kind of things that they were saying were, and I don't know if it's still on the website anymore, but the old testimonials that I used to throw up on the website were like, I feel like I just left the spa, or I've never had this kind of experience in a services business before. We were blowing people away. And how were we able to do that when we had like 4 support reps and our competition had like 250? Because we're just normal people that cared. That's all. And those were the kind of people that hired then people like themselves who gave a damn. And we had been in the shoes of the customers who were frustrated working with like Digital River. So we tried to build a business that would be the opposite. And it totally worked. And also it's an advantage that we had, which didn't really cost money, that nobody could beat. No competitor could beat. They could try to match it, blowing away your customers and wowing them with the experience, but they couldn't ever beat it. And so part of what made the company so enduring is we had low prices. You couldn't really beat us on pricing. We had next generation technology instead of kind of the inflexible dinosaur tech of our competitors, and we blew you away with customer service. So how do you get anyone to switch away from FastSpring? They didn't. We had retained, I think, 98.7% of our customers year after year after year in an SMB business with thousands of customers. I'm a venture capitalist now. I invest in software companies. I'm yet to find a company in all these years that matches what FastSpring attained in its metrics.
I can attest that nature has lived on, and we see similar levels of success in our business today, including winning awards like a Gold Globie and Silver Stevie for that customer success. So I think that foundation you laid and the seeds you planted are still bearing fruit.
Good. That's great to hear.
Excellent. Yeah, super cool to see that endure the test of time, because I know service can be one of those areas that definitely erodes over time, especially over like a 20-year history. It was also interesting to hear you talk about how if you have a team, if you hire a team and develop a team who cares, that's like so critical to building that differentiation and that enduring nature. And I thought that connected well to what David had shared a little earlier around flexibility and developing teams in that same way to address challenges that you have no idea what's coming around the corner. I thought that was an interesting connection there. Speaking of like speaking of missions, by sake of example, what was FastSpring's mission in the beginning? You talked about like being better than Digital River, but like, was it more than that? Like, how did you view the mission of the company at that time?
I think we wanted to build a business that treated its customers the way we thought we should have been treated as software vendors. Everything that was wrong with the experience of working with Digital River and its competitors and non-software specific platforms like PayPal, we wanted to correct that because we felt wronged ourselves. And so I think that was a big part of the mission. And we thought if we were just normal, nice people that cared, we could accomplish that. And we did. Took a while, but we did. And we did displace a lot of those alternatives. But mission wise, I think that's really what our driving force was, is to put some good into an industry that had a lot of bad experiences.
David, 20 years later, how do you define FastSpring's mission now?
Yeah, so I think, a lot of what Dan just shared is still very true and very important in what we're doing. Um, what gets me excited is kind of the bigger trend we're playing into in enabling. And for me, it's about democratizing the software development industry. And what I mean by that is if you look over the last 20 years, since the company was founded, barrier after barrier has come down that allows people to build software anywhere in the world at any scale and compete, with much bigger, much better capitalized players, in highly developed markets. So, going way back, open source, developer tools, cloud computing, online marketing, now we've got the AI boom. So it's gotten dramatically easier to build software anywhere and do it in a really, really competitive way. What hasn't gotten easier is selling it globally. It's actually kind of gone in some respects in the opposite direction. Tax complexity around the world has gone up a ton. Enforcement has gone up a ton. The regulatory environment around data has gone up. Payments has gotten a lot more complex. The proliferation of payment methods around the world is pretty incredible, and the adoption of a lot of these payment methods is really high. Fraud is going up. I don't know if it's exponentially, but it's certainly going up at a high rate, and the complexity of that fraud is going up. So you've got this paradox of you can develop software now at any scale anywhere in the world, but it's not easy to bring it to market successfully without a solution like ours. And that's what we do. And if you look around the world, there's no monopoly on development talent in places like Silicon Valley. And there's talented developers everywhere in the world now, but there were barriers to them competing. So, by democratizing software development and commercialization of it, ultimately, we're playing into a trend of unleashing more innovation around the world. So it's that's kind of a big, lofty mission that excites me, and I think it does excite a lot of people here.
Excellent. Love hearing that. Um, Dan, so we've talked about like it's a 20-year episode, right? So we're doing like the warm and fuzzy stuff, but I want to go to like the stuff that made you lose sleep at night in the early days of FastSpring. Tell me about a big mistake you made that like almost tanked the company or just like took you in a really bad direction. I mean, we are publishing this, so like take that in to heart there. But was it deprecating this website? I mean, this is a
That
flyer of a 2025 website, but like, tell me about the mistakes you made.
looks a little pretty to me. Uh, well, obviously we made lots of mistakes. I think, one key decision was we kept coding really just within Ryan's domain and didn't hire a bunch of developers. And I think there were benefits to that and cost. And sometimes we were frustrated we weren't going faster. Because when we came out, a company also came out around the same time, and unlike us, who did everything, by the way, with $30,000, I put 10 grand in. That's all I ever put into FastSpring. We had a competitor that had also sold their company, Digital River, and they put like 35 or 50 million into their company, and they started eating our lunch. So that made us kind of frustrated and concerned because they were getting a lot of the clients we had hoped to get. So that was one decision. And also, I think using Java, I think had a lot of benefits, but also I think it slowed us down as well. Now, in the long term, it was beneficial and a great decision because it kept us flexible and extendable. But let's see. So one of the scarier things that happen is when you're processing payments, there's risks that you might process some payments that are violations of, say, your relationship and your agreement with, say, a Visa or MasterCard. And we got really good at policing and avoiding any transactions going through the system that would violate any of those agreements. Like with hackers, you figure out a solution to avoid the hacking, and then the hackers find a way around it, and then you find a solution to solve that, and then they find a way. So it wasn't perfect, it's life. And we had particular incident where some content got through that we did processing for. It's a tiny amount, but it still was very problematic. And that was very costly to us. We had to deal with MasterCard. And, to have an angry MasterCard is a real problem because you can't stop working with MasterCard if you're accepting credit cards, right? That kind of got this duopoly or whatever you want to call it. So that was an example of a really scary experience when we had to deal with people like Visa, MasterCard, and some of the risks around processing that could have really hurt our business and changed things. But and I would say, in terms of the team that we had, we got along incredibly well. It probably didn't hurt that we weren't in the same office and hardly ever saw each other. That can really have a lot of benefits. The biggest fight we ever had, and when we had it, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be such a battle for years, was picking the name. After we had that, that was like a real battle. And I didn't know what the future would bring. And we went years and years with really not having any fights, maybe until the end when we were selling the business and not everyone wanted to necessarily sell at the same price. And, money gets people to fight. But other than that, we really made a great call with the kind of team that we had as founders, because we had a team of 4 former CEOs, which meant we were all able to kind of do our own stuff without anybody needing to help us. Right. And so we split up the business into silos. Ken handles support, Ryan development, me on the sales side, and also all the CEO role, and Jason on the sales side and some other stuff too. And that worked really well. Um, but anyway, so those are some thoughts on some of the things that were challenges over the years. Um, and not raising capital, going slower, sticking with Java, sticking with one developer, all those things made us go slower. And for me, made me anxious. But some of the other partners, they were okay with waiting and having the business take a long time. And it sure did. My wife nicknamed it Slow Spring because it was like year 3.5 or something, and we still weren't getting anywhere. And I kept telling her, oh, it's right around the corner. Finally, things picked up. They picked up because we became popular in the Mac software community. We found a niche, right? I don't know what would have happened to FastSpring if we hadn't found that niche. But eventually we took over for Digital River and others as kind of the leading provider for Mac developers. But until then, it was a very slow moving train. And, we didn't know what was around the corner.
I think that's a bold lesson for people watching and listening who are just starting out and thinking about how to get traction, about how you were able to kind of niche down in your core ICP and find that, kind of handhold, foothold to start moving further up the mountain. I also thought you had tension in some of the mistakes where you talked about the desire to go faster and invest more, but then you talked about growing pains around things like dealing with hackers and maybe processing transactions you shouldn't have, and how that affected and put risk into your business. And so, like with FastSpring, we're offering payments and subscriptions and tax compliance, and a lot of startups are like, compliance? What are you talking about? I'm blowing and growing. I'm ready to go. Do you think that like maybe moving slow and being more purposeful did have value other than just being, slow spring and making you a little frustrated with the growth?
Probably. 2 of my partners would say definitely yes.
Would those be
Um,
Ken and Ryan?
they would be.
Yeah.
Yes, they are more patient people than I am.
Nice. I like that. But yeah, I think about that a lot, in this day. I don't know how much you've kept up with the merchant of record space, but there's a decent number of startups getting into it. And so I just imagine what it must be like to start from near zero and develop these rules and this experience and this understanding and a platform that reacts to it all.
Yeah.
Certainly a grand adventure, but definitely no easy
It
tasks.
it was, and I think one error was that we didn't really have expertise in the whole merchant account payment processing business. I mean, yes, software and what used to be called shareware and the Digital River side of things, but the actual, like, all the intricacies of working with, like, Visa, Mastercard, Discover, Amex, PayPal, and doing global payments in different currencies and different language, we really didn't know that stuff. And so sometimes we learned some hard lessons because of our ignorance. It would have, if I were to do it again, I would bring someone involved in the early days who really had spent, I don't know, 20 years in that payment space. So we didn't have to figure out what we didn't know. I think that was costly to us, and I think that was something missing, a missing ingredient that fortunately we were successful despite it.
Did you underestimate the complexity of payments?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And the deep understanding that was needed to really know what we were working with and what we were doing and how it was viewed by others playing all different roles in the industry, the ISOs, IPSPs, the Visas and MasterCards, the acquiring banks, the gateways, we just didn't really have a great understanding of how all of those different parties were seeing us in their world. And so we didn't necessarily navigate it the best way that we could have if we had known more.
Sage advice. Um, as you look back at your time with FastSpring, founding it, bringing it up, eventually selling it, and the roles and companies you've led since then. What lessons did you learn in your FastSpring days that you took forward into your future adventures?
Well, we built FastSpring to not be able to fail because we had all been serial entrepreneurs and had built businesses. Some worked, some didn't. And one thing that I figured out is if you don't have a clock tied to money and burn, it's really hard to go out of business. And so we built the business from scratch with almost no money. Like I said, I put in 10 grand. And the co-founders contributed their time for no cash, just for equity, right? Significant equity, founders' equity. And so the only way the business could fail is if we lost interest. Nothing external could really make us fail. It really was in our control. So it's a question of, do we lose interest before we get enough customers that this business is big enough that we care about it? And it's making a difference for us. So with that, it gave us quite a runway to be able to figure things out, which took really 4 years to really start taking off. And believe me, the first 3 years wasn't just fun. And of course, while you're building it, you don't know if you're ever going to make it. So you might be wasting your time. So it's not always the most motivating every day. But, I've built every business since like that, where it's either profitable for day one or it just doesn't have that burn and that pressure. Because what's the number one reason businesses go out of business? They run out of cash. So if you can get rid of that risk, you got a really good chance of making it. So, I've had a lot of successes in my career. FastSpring is one of them. There's a whole bunch of other things I've done and all that. And the thing that they all have in common is they all failed before they succeeded, right? I mean, people don't see that. They just see the news headlines and, great exit for FastSpring or Picasa or what I did at Google or go to meeting in Santa Barbara. But all those things failed first. So the only reason I've been able to figure out how to build these businesses successfully now, including my venture capital firm, is because of all the things I did that failed in the past. And so I think that's the biggest lesson that I bring forward to every business I do and hope to pass on to other entrepreneurs and to my children and whatnot, that it's really the failures where you learn how to succeed.
I imagine what that must be like. So these are the years and the number of employees from back in those days. And you were saying like it really took you the better part of this time period to get it ramped up. And then you can start to see the business grow over time. It's very efficient business still during that time.
Well, keep in mind, so in 2013, that was 23. There weren't really employees. 12 were full time. The rest were part time contractors. We made them employees later after we sold the business, but that was at a time we were doing over $100 million in revenue. We had 12 full timers, so it was very efficient, and we did not in any way measure ourselves by number of people. It was by revenue and profit.
That's great to hear. Okay, so Dan has founded the business with his co-founders, and they've gone on this grand adventure, eventually selling the business. Nachman, tell me the backstory about when you joined the business and what you were
Yeah,
kind of
so
doing right before that.
I've been in B2B tech just about my whole career. Immediately before joining FastSpring, I was running a business that had a very highly tailored content management platform for local government. So it was cities and counties, they would host a website on it, but also we would power a lot of the constituent facing functionality. So, we sort of powered the digital city hall strategy that, a lot of local governments are moving towards. We had sold that business to someone who was really consolidating all of the GovTech industry. And I found my way indirectly to FastSpring, was drawn to it for a whole host of reasons. But that's ultimately, what brought me here, or the backstory in terms of what I was doing before I got here.
And then as you entered the business, what were your perceptions at that time? How did you think about FastSpring's mission then versus now? Like, we had this great meeting the other day where we were like, where did you get wrong about FastSpring when you first joined the company? What about for you, David? What did you get wrong about FastSpring when you first joined the
Yeah, so I think some of the same things that Dan mentioned. I'm not sure that I necessarily underestimated the complexity of payments, but I'm not a payments guy by trade and experience. We had a lot of generalists even at that point. in the company. And we had a lot of really passionate, a lot of really talented people. And I've kind of always been one of those people who believes, okay, if you get get smart people that are driven, they're going to figure out problems. And yes, but they're not going to figure them out as quickly in many cases. It's someone who's got the pattern recognition of having seen that same problem 15 times before. Um, and I think I waited a little too long to really bolster a lot of our domain expertise in the business. And as I started to do that, just what it did in terms of accelerating the business was pretty profound. And it was one of those where I sort of stepped back and said, wow, I should have done that a long time ago. I'd say the other thing is when I came into the business, my perceptions were very positive of the business. Great solution, great customers, business growing at a very healthy clip. So, it was a very healthy business. It wasn't, a turnaround of any sort. It was how do we take it to the next level? So what was missing in my mind was that it really wasn't built to scale to anywhere, the size we are today or, where we think we'll be over the coming few years. And like a lot of small businesses, a lot of single points of failure. Some of that was people, some of that was vendors, some of that was technology. The business sort of survived and thrived on individual heroics. So, not a lot of systems in place, processes, et cetera. And we didn't really have a leadership team that had scaled to where we wanted to go. So I felt like, we did need to bring in people that were more experienced and kind of knew the journey that we were embarking on. And I think a little bit of what I got wrong there in some of these initial hires was I was very focused on getting people that, kind of knew how to operate at scale. And culturally, I missed on some of them in terms of abandoning a lot of what's made the company so special and so effective, which is kind of the entrepreneurial scrappiness. And it's a rare breed of person that has that hands-on entrepreneurial scrappiness and can also scale. Um, you know, Often those are, great founder type people that, could do magic that a lot of, more experienced company people can't do, but they don't scale as well. So initially I did bring some of those people in and they weren't the right fit. And, over my first few years here, I started to really realize what's the culture that really correlates with success in our particular business. And part of it is this is the most dynamic, most complex business I've ever been at for its scale. I mean, we've got a very global footprint. We're operating in highly regulated industries. We're dealing with payments. We're dealing with software. We're dealing with complexity around tax. We're dealing with, a lot of regulation around data. It's kind of infinitely complex. And this goes back to this notion of adaptability. You have to have some level of scrappy entrepreneurialism to thrive in this business. But it also has to be paired with, you know, you know how to scale a business. And it's not all about, hey, I'm just going to do the heroics to get us to the next challenge. It's no, I'm going to build a foundation where if I'm not here, this business will still run quite well. So I think, there are definitely things I got right, but there were some things I got wrong in trying to make that transition from more of a startup company to a really scalable company.
Yeah, that's kind of like an awkward teenagery zone a little
That's
bit,
right.
and
Yeah.
that's a whole. Sorry, go ahead.
We definitely went through our awkward teenage phase. I hope we're out of
Yeah,
that now.
knock on wood on that one for sure. Still got to build the enduring business of the future, right?
That's right.
Um, we're kind of getting towards the end here, so I want to make sure to hit on a couple of things, here in the last little bit. Nachman, since I'm on you, I'll stick with you for this one. But if somebody's out there and they have a, startup and they're like, listening to all these points of view, maybe taking some notes along the way. But what's the one thing that person should get from listening to you about building an enduring business? Like, what's your number one piece of advice?
It's embrace change and change before you have to. You can't build an enduring business doing the same thing for any period of time. And period of time is shrinking with every given year. I mean, given what's going on with AI right now, the time frames over which things evolve is just collapsing. So it's, constantly think about how your business is going to be reimagined and go do that. Don't let somebody else do that to you. You've got to get out in front of it.
Great one. Embrace change and change before you have to. Dan, what about you?
I would say uh, treating your own people extremely well and having that then trickle down to how they treat your customers, and the concept of treating your customers like gold and bending over backwards to ensure that they are just wowed by the experience of working with you compared to what they're used to from alternatives. And then I think in terms of building a business, removing the obstacles as much as possible that lead companies to fail, including dealing with things like burn up front.
Like it. I love the people first thing. I think this is like the Dan Golden rule. Treat others as you want them to treat your customers. I love it. All right. Last question. Sorry about that little mic pop there. Dan, we're going to show this recording to the FastSpring team, and they're pretty much all going to listen to it and watch it. Do you have a special message for them to celebrate the 20-year FastSpring anniversary?
Special message. Well, I guess, I'm glad that everybody's part of something with the humble roots and mission that we originally started on to try to offer a better alternative in an industry that was plagued with some negativity. But I think, I challenge everybody to really think about how to make the next 20 years of Fast Spring successful, dealing with all the change. Change has been a big theme here in our conversation. So we have all the different things happening around, say, AI, or how people purchase software, or what Apple's store looks like and what they can and can't do. All different facets are going to continuously change. And so I hope folks are thinking about how they can continuously adapt to ensure that FastSpring survives and thrives through all the shifts ahead. Some will be good and some will be bad for the company, so that we can have this kind of a conversation again after another 20 years.
Nice. I like it. Dan, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. It was super interesting to hear about your backstory and some of the things that went into building such an enduring business. But thank you so much for joining us today.
You betcha. Thanks for having me, and congratulations on the 20 years. And thanks everyone for doing such a great job with the business.
Thank you, of course. And then, David, thank you for joining and picking up the torch and then sharing your backstory here at the helm.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed the discussion. I've learned some things about the business I don't think I knew, Dan. So it's fantastic to get the time to interact and learn a
Okay.
little bit about our roots and history.
Excellent. And for those watching and listening, if you'd like to learn more about FastSpring, you can visit fastspring.com. Thanks for joining us for the Growth Stage podcast. I've been your host, David Vogelpol. I support the digital product community as part of my role here at FastSpring, and I love to bring the best of the community to you here on Growth Stage. Thanks, everybody.